Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. As we look ahead to game week 1 of the 2023-24 season, we are looking at the pre-season matches and crucially those last either one or two matches of teams' pre-season campaign to see, which gives us a bit more of a clue of how they might set up in game week 1. My name is Joe, and joining me to discuss these pre-season matches is Marc Joblin. Fantasy Football Scouts writer. How are you, Marc?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. The days are getting closer, aren't they, to the season? I don't know how to feel about it, but in general, not too bad. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's getting closer. It's been hectic. Lots of content coming out on the site, lots of articles and lots of videos and podcasts as well. For everyone watching, do remember to like, really helps us out, and press that like button, and also to subscribe to ensure you don't miss out on any of our future content. So let's get stuck in. We're going to do this alphabetically. I'm going to do it in a similar sort of way that I do the team news with the team badges, although I don't yet have team badges for the promoted side, so I'll get the team badge boffins onto that in time for team news. So we'll look at pre-season matches. We'll do it alphabetically. We've got Arsenal and Villa first, so let's start with Arsenal. They had a couple of matches. August 2nd, they played Monaco. It was a draw, and Nketiah scored, Martinelli assisted. And of course, in the Community Shield, Arsenal and Man City was 1-1, and they won on penalties. Trossard scored, Saka assisted there. So what are the main takeaways of those games, if we can get any, for game week 1?
Well, the major news that happens, certainly with that Monaco game, is that was when it was revealed that Gabriel Jesus would be injured for the start of the season. So that then brought up the question, right, well, who starts up front? Is it Nketiah, 5.5 million?
Yeah.
Does Havertz go up front? Does Trossard play up front? And just when we thought maybe the Community Shield lineup gave us a clue with Havertz starting up front, he missed a couple of chances, and then Trossard came on and equalised. So I don't feel like we're much closer to knowing.
No, so Trossard could play as a false 9. Havertz played there. He could play on the left side of midfield. Could play the left wing, although that would supplant Martinelli. Still lots of choice, lots of options, aren't there?
So many, yeah. And even though some managers, FPL managers, have decided that they still want to double up on Arsenal's attack, so it's like, right, which midfielder do we get? We just don't know. And unless Arteta gives any clues in his press conference, it's going to be risky to go for anybody but Martinelli or Odegaard or Saka, really.
Okay. Saka for me, still on penalties, so my choice. I think Martinelli just gets the nod. I noticed he played furthest forward for the majority of the match that he was on the pitch for, so that appealed to me, especially Man City. They're one thing, but Nottingham Forest defence, that's another.
Completely.
So Villa, let's have a look at Villa. So lots of interest in Villa. Did really well last season, into Europe again, which is good to return to Europe after a number of years out of the Europe-wide competition. They played Lazio and beat them on August the 3rd, and then played August the 5th. So Lazio, with that Lazio match, Watkins, Tielemans assist, McGinn was a cash assist, and there was no goal with a Revan assist. And then August the 5th, Aston Villa beat Valencia 2-1, and Watkins and Buendia, with Coutinho getting the assist there. So Watkins has been doing well. With Jesus out, lots of interest in Watkins. He's certainly got the pre-season, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's sort of very quickly. I think within sort of maybe 12 hours of each other, the Jesus and Nkunku injuries occurred, and so very quickly Ollie Watkins went from being possibly overlooked to being quite the obvious sort of answer for a lot of people, and that's 4 pre-season goals for him. He has the form. He's got decent fixtures to start off with, and seem to be rejuvenated under Emery. And at 8 million, he also gives the downgrade option. It's always easier to downgrade than to raise the cash to upgrade someone. So he has that sort of security. He's sort of tried and trusted. Well, not always trusted. Yeah, if it wasn't for that streak last season, he probably still wouldn't be too much of a popular pick in general. But I think he's earned the trust back since Emery's arrived. So he's a leading forward to go
Okay.
alongside Haaland.
What about Diaby as well? Lots of interest in Diaby. I've just done the Goals Imminent video podcast with Tom, and Diaby's in his team, not Watkins. So yeah, Diaby's been impressing, if perhaps not assisting or scoring.
Yeah, and that's from a Villa fan himself, so that's interesting to see. I was until the injuries happened to Jesus and Nkunku, I was definitely warming up to sort of the Diaby instead of Mitoma and Buemo option. And he was having written the scout notes on the website for one of their friendlies. It was clear that he was settling very well,
Yeah.
was possibly playing out up front, out of position. So he is a very, very interesting option. And because he's 1.5 million cheaper than Watkins, if some managers are looking at trying to wedge Salah in there, so that could be a way to do it by saving 1.5 million there.
Okay, let's move on. We got Bournemouth and Brentford. I've lumped together because of their alphabetical nature there. Mark, can I just get you to move into the centre of the screen slightly? So yeah, bit further, a little bit further. There we go. Saves me just having to, make people feel ill by moving the camera around on the screen. There we go. That's it now. Don't have to move anything else. Yeah, let's go for Bournemouth first. New manager. Could be a different side, but for those investing in Liverpool in Gameweek 2, they hope not. They hope they're still rubbish. But Bournemouth, they nevertheless did stay up last season. They lost 3-1 to Atlanta, but Senesi scored with Solanke assisting, and then they won against Lorient on August the 5th. So it was July the 29th, the Atalanta game. And then back at the Vitality, August the 5th, they scored a couple of goals more. Senesi assist there, and Utara assisted Brooks. Lots of options, but a bit of an unknown at the moment, aren't they, still?
You're a bit of an unknown. Not only have they got life under Areola, but there's so many interesting 5 million midfield options if managers wanted to go there. Like we saw David Brooks, that was his third preseason goal of the summer. He's 5 million. Ryan Christie has been in form. And then, as you say, there was a couple of assists over the summer for Ouattara, and there's also Justin Kluivert as well. So they've got a lot of 5 million midfield options. We just don't know which one.
No.
And of course, we don't know if anyone should be picked really, because we just don't know how this side compares with Gary O'Neill's side.
Okay. Brentford had a couple of games against Lille on August the 5th. So you can tell me a little about why that was. But they drew the first one, 0-0, and it was 5-1. The next one was Sade, Norgards, Olakibi, with two goals from Olakibi and Sade again. So 2 goals from Sade. Just reading out from the screen there. Yeah, much better than the second game. Why were they having 2 games? Presumably, and were sort of key assets like Rissa and Bomo and some of their defenders playing in that first game.
Yeah, it was two. Well, by the looks of it, it's 2 totally different lineups, and the first one, the one that didn't win 5-1, was the stronger.
Okay.
So
that was the Mbomo one.
The Mbomo was the 0-0.
Oh yeah.
And he got taken off early, but it was precautionary. And we have seen pictures of him back in training today, so that really does seem to be absolutely fine. And that first game also had the likes of Rissa, Flecken. Was Rico Henry in that one? Can't see him there actually, but yeah, the first one looks stronger, but the second one won 5-1 thanks to Kevin Shader and Norgard and stuff. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, once again, we're not so sure about that. So their stronger team 0-0, and some of those other players that people aren't considering against Lille. So yeah, not much. Not I don't think, even though it was like coming up to their their last games, pre-season games. There's not much we can glean from that, which is annoying. However, the next couple of teams, particularly with Brighton, we can glean a lot. There's a lot of useful information for their last game against Valencia, and it was Pedro scored in a 1-1, but he was crucially on the penalty. And so he has come out saying that he wants to be the regular penalty taker in the press above McAllister. So whatever the lineup, whoever's playing, if Pedro's on the pitch, because Gross was on the pitch at the same time, it does look like Pedro has penalties. And another interesting thing, a Stupinan assist there. So that shows that the attacking fullbacks, the wingers, could be earning those penalties because they're tricksy fellas, particularly Matoma. So that does bode well for Pedro returns. But was that the sort of information that you gleaned from that match as well?
Yeah, as someone who's never really had João Pedro on the radar all summer, I feel like that second penalty is sort of forcing him into the conversation. I don't know, is he in your expertise here? Is he,
yeah, he is. I just revealed down the goal was imminent video. Yes, and he hasn't gone really. He's been there for quite a while. I actually had him in a 3-4-3 few weeks ago with because that's how cool and hipster I am with Jesus. So I had Jesus up top. So, but now I've moved to a 3-5-2 because I still want to get a lot of Arsenal attacking coverage. And Pedro fitted into that system, 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. I liked him, and yeah, looks good. And on penalties, 5.5. That's a gift horse in my books.
There's so many names. Is he playing as a central striker, or is he playing just off behind?
He can play both, and that's what I quite like about him. So he can play in a support. He can support Welbeck or Ferguson, but he can also be supported by perhaps Enciso. And so there's options there, and that's what I like about him. Record signing so far, and he's got the number 9 shirt, which I know used to be had by Neil Maupay at Brighton. But nevertheless, Neil Maupay played a lot. So he didn't score a lot, but he did play a lot. And so at least Pedro will play a lot. That indicates maybe.
And when you say so far, of course, it does sound like Kudus could be coming in for Ajax. And that's another body. That's another attacking body.
He's more an attacking midfielder. So he would compete with Pedro if Pedro was an attacking midfielder. But also he competes with Solly March. And I think it's possible that there isn't really competition for March, top level Europe. So you imagine he's been brought in perhaps to play on the right wing on those European games, maybe. But also I can't imagine he's been brought in saying, "Do you mind being the backup to Solly March?" As much as I love Solly March, I can't imagine that being an enticing move for an Ajax player. So I think he's been brought in to start.
Yeah, possibly. And João Pedro, I think the more I hear that you and others talk about him, the more tempted it would be to get him in. It's just the risk that, for game week 1, possibly game week 2, but by the 3rd week, does the rotation happen because really don't want transfers?
To be honest, I'm not going to talk about him anymore because when I first got in, his ownership was 5%, and now it's like getting up to 6 or 7%. No, about 7%, and it's going to go up more. So don't get him in. I'd like him to be my differential, please. Let's move on to Burnley.
One more thing there, sorry. The error from Jason Steele, that's not going to be a problem. It's not going to cost
No. I mean, I wouldn't imagine so. I think he's still the most trusted goalkeeper there. But yeah, I mean, at Brighton have 2, in some cases 3 players per position, good players as well, who could come in seamlessly. So if he decided to replace Steele, or if Steele was injured, for example, for Bruggen, who's come in as a young keeper, who I think has been brought in more for the long term and also for Europe, I think would easily come in. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think that. I mean, if a keeper was replaced after 1 error in a friendly, well, there's no hope for anyone.
Onana would be gone as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. It would just be ridiculous. And he is the trusted, his distribution. And let's not forget, he may have made that error there, but he's also racked up another assist. He got an assist during pre-season. That's 2 since he's cemented number one shirt. Although I don't believe he has technically the number one shirt officially. Yeah, let's move on to Burnley. They play Man City, so there's going to be a lot of interest in Man City attack, particularly Haaland captaining him. But they didn't fare. He didn't fare so well in the last game against Mainz. 3-0. They got beaten there. I mean, has that been typical of their pre-season?
Yeah, well, they sort of had. They started off by beating a few lower league sides and then lost again, but then they beat Benfica, which was probably the tougher opponent, and then a draw against Betis and the defeat there. So it's been a mixed bag, really. I think from that match, the most recent one, we take away again that 2 4 million defenders started, as they seem to have all summer, really, at Bayer and Aldakil.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a route to take. But then that blank game week 2 might be a slight problem if there was any plan to play one of them. It sounds like they might be signing Sander Berge from Sheffield United as well, which is on the surface unexpected.
Okay, well he was. I remember when we did the promoted video, he was one of those names on that. That could be has the potential to be an okay FPL asset. So maybe. I suddenly remembered. I just need to go back to that Brighton just to add in just before we move on to Everton. To Chelsea and Crystal Palace. That Lewis Dunk and Solly March have been either completely or partially rested during much of the pre-season because of injuries, but they were both back and both started that last match, which indicates they will carry on in game week 1. So I do think if you've got Dunk or March, or you want to punt on them, I think you should be safe, as safe as we can be with the Brighton picks. Let's go move on to Chelsea, Crystal Palace. Lots of interest in Chelsea, but we had the news today that Nkunku is out until December. Now he was in one of my drafts, obviously no longer there. I don't know what to make of Chelsea. He was the one I wanted. Chilwell and James are interest me. I don't really know much about any of the others. Jackson, I don't know about. I don't know how the midfield's gonna work. Lots of changes there. But their last game, 1-1 against Borussia Dortmund, with Burstow. I don't even know who. You're going to educate me here. I don't know who Burstow is. With an Enzo assist. So yeah, I mean, what can we make of that last match?
Yeah, I suppose the general question about the Nkunku injury is: does this make Nicholas Jackson a more or less appealing option because his minutes should be a little bit more secure, but the team as a whole is probably going to be worse with that? And yeah, there's the other thing to take away is that possibly 4.5 million midfielder Carney Chukwuemeka, I believe. I hope that's the pronunciation.
Yeah.
Could that now mean?
All I see is the name Chumbawamba when I see that name, and so I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. But my terrible reading skills completely turn them into an early 90s, late 80s agit prop band.
So could he possibly be the leading cheap midfielder now? But if there's a spare Chelsea slot, perhaps. But yeah, it's all up in the air with them now that Nkunku's injured, especially if it forces them in the transfer market again.
Okay. Let's have a look at Chelsea. So Jackson's going to start up front, you presume?
Yeah, you think so. Even if these rumours about Vlahovic coming in are true, he's not going to get thrown straight in the lineup. So Jackson, it's his shirt to lose, really.
Okay. Let's move on to Crystal Palace, just the last game. So we've got lots of these pre-season videos. So you can look back at all of them, as we've been going through the stages. But this is obviously the latest one. We're looking at the last matches. And that was Crystal Palace's, was August the 5th, where they beat Lyon at Selhurst Park 2-0. Jeffrey Schlupp with an score with an Eze assist. Edouard with an Anderson assist. So Eze's the one people want. And how has he been doing pre-season? Got a return here. Has that been quite typical?
Yeah, 2 goals, 5 assists. He's been one of the league's most productive guys in preseason. So every time he chips in with another one, it just strengthens. It sort of makes the argument for him louder. So he's interesting. I think an overlooked option is possibly 5.5 million forward Edouard,
Oh,
same price as João Pedro.
okay.
Um, but he's got a few goals over the last over the final preseason game, so he looks to have cemented that spot over Mateta.
Okay. Now that is
Lewis
interesting,
Hall
especially if you're going for Pedro and you're looking to sort of move away from him and where can you go to? Edward could be the one.
could be, and Lewis Hall seems to be arriving on loan from Chelsea,
Oh,
very highly regarded. Whether he starts at left back or becomes a midfielder for Palace, I guess we'll find out. They bought Mateus Franca from Flamengo, but he already has a knock, so he's out. And the other thing is that um, I was looking at as a potential 4.5 midfielder was Ahamada. Um, for the first 4 or 5 games, he seemed to be Palace's
yeah.
most played player, but then those last couple of friendlies, he has sort of dropped to the bench, so he might not be the
Okay.
guy after all.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, he was actually when I had my 3-4-3, he was actually that 4.5 midfielder of choice there. So yeah, that handy tip there because there might be some still with that formation, and yeah, he's not a player you can rely on to get those points off the bench. There. Let's move on to Everton of Fulham's final pre-season games. So let's go with Everton first. Bit of interest there because they've got kind opening fixtures. They played Sporting and Calvert-Lewin penalty. Decore assist. So Decore familiar pre-season hero and a really good strong for sort of game week one early game weeks player as well. But Calvert-Lewin penalty. So if Calvert-Lewin's fit, he's got to be considered presumably. But if is a big word.
Yeah, I think Sean Dyche has already put doubt upon him starting game week one because he did start and he did score, but went off at half time. So just as maybe the thoughts started to creep back again, do we go the Calvert Lewin route? That sort of quote from Dyche dampens it again because
Okay.
he's what's been
All right,
on.
Theo. Anything else of note, Everton? I know Branthwaite was 4 million option. Has he been getting any minutes? Did he play in this?
No, his minutes haven't really arrived. Tarkovsky did go off
Oh, okay.
hurt, so that could come something. But there's still sort of Godfrey and Keane in
Okay.
that centre back position, so it's certainly not nailed that Branthwaite would play, which is a shame because he'd be a really good option if he was. But unless Dyche comes out in his press conference and says, "I'm going to start with him,"
Okay.
probably.
Moving on to Fulham. Now I'm a bit out of the loop with Fulham. Mitrovic wanted to go. Did he in fact go? Because I know Jimenez came in, so it seems like Jimenez has supplanted him. Is Mitrovic no longer there?
Mitrovic is still there.
Oh, right.
He is, and he
Must be friendly there.
yeah, and he came on in this match actually for Jimenez. So it's just a question of is he waiting for a move or is that all over now?
Yeah.
But he did come on for Jimenez in the 68th minute, and Andreas Pereira came on at the same time and racked up an assist. And as you say, yeah, Jimenez scored. So he's another interesting 5.5. But as long as Mitrovic is there, you can't really take that punt on Jimenez, really.
Okay, so just to recap, Fulham beat Hoffenheim 2-1, and it was Jimenez and Bassey, or Bassey, maybe Shirley Bassey scored, and Andreas assist. Robinson assisted Jimenez. So good to see Jimenez on the score sheet. He'd never really, since that head injury, never really cut it as an FPL option at Wolves. So I don't think he's going to get much interest. He's got to prove himself, I think, to us managers, and no matter what he does in pre-season, I don't think it's going to do. You need to see him in proper games. Let's move on to Liverpool Luton. So still awaiting that Luton badge. So I've written them in. But Liverpool, it's been goals. Their opponents and them as well. Now they played last night, so you can update me on that. But in August the 2nd, they were beaten 3-4 by Bayern Munich. Gakpo, Van Dijk, and Diaz scored. Jota, Salah, and Robertson got assists there. They played last night against Darmstadt at Preston's Deepdale Stadium. Lots of goals, I understand.
Yes, this one was 3-1 win for Liverpool. And interestingly, they started with four of the five main
Oh,
forwards.
okay.
A lot of the time, it's sort of been having to pick alongside Salah, having to pick two from the other four is sounds like an impossible task. But three of the four started here. The only one that didn't was Darwin Nunez, and he's sort of the one who's one of the most selected forwards in the game right now.
Right.
So I think um, Darwin, yes, he has racked up the goals in preseason. He's in some respects had a good one, but at the same time, Klopp has criticised not so subtly the forwards for how they're maybe not pressing. Some of them better than others at
Okay.
pressing the opponent's defense, and he hasn't started with Darwin for those last couple of friendlies. So
So,
it
so,
feels
that,
like,
so would that indicate that Jota and Gakpo are favoured?
well, it would seem to suggest that for game week one, he would go with that those two in Salah because that's what ended the season so well for them.
Yeah.
They'll really put Newcastle under pressure
Okay.
for the Champions League spot there. Um,
So would that
and
be would that be a Jota on the left, Gakpo through the centre, or Jota through the centre? And what about Diaz? Presumably he would come in on the left.
well, last night it seemed to be that Gakpo was sort of in a number eight, sort of an
Oh, okay.
advanced midfielder role, and Jota started centrally,
Okay.
Diaz on the left. So uh, your guess is as good as
Okay.
everyone's really. We don't know, but certainly someone like Jota, he's interesting for someone who really, really, really wants coverage of Liverpool's attack, but don't want the expensiveness of Salah. Jota could be an interesting route. But the thing is, even if you're confident he starts game week one against Chelsea, you still have no idea whether he starts against Bournemouth the week after.
And what about Alexander Arnold in this sort of inverted role, or is he more of a fullback in this one?
I believe he was full back, but sort of doing the inverting, I
Oh,
think.
okay.
But
Coming into midfield in a defensive role. I'm not sure I like him in that role, really, as an FPL asset.
no, he's in terms of assists in pre-season, he got one fairly early on in their second friendly, but after that, he hasn't scored or assisted, and Liverpool are conceding quite a lot. So, from all those aspects, it would suggest not starting with
Okay.
Trent, but the season is a different beast, isn't it?
Moving on to Luton, because there's a few cheap assets there. They of course missed game week 2, but nevertheless lots of assets there. So they played Bochum, 3-1 victory there. Adebayo assisted and scored, and Doty, another asset fullback, bit that's been interesting. He got an assist as well. So yeah, I mean, I remember looking at Luton earlier. It was still a bit unclear who was going to be their penalty taker, and whether Adebayo was, a credible option to get up front. But yeah, so what's the situation sort of with the strikers and penalties from this last match?
This was another game where they basically played each other twice,
Okay,
Luton and Bochum. So the first one was a 2-1 loss. The second one was a 3-1 win, and
okay,
it was different lineups really. So the first one did have Morris start up front, who
yeah,
seems to be the penalty taker we've
okay,
established over preseason.
okay.
And he was up front with Ogbene, and it was the second match where Adebayo played. So does that create doubt over who starts alongside Morris, perhaps?
You would imagine, but Adebayo with his goal and assist has certainly done his prospects of a start quite good. Okay, that's interesting there. Two big guns next, Man City and Manchester United. So we've sort of covered Manchester City a little bit, but we look at that Charity Shield, Community Shield rather, match. From the Man City perspective, it was Palmer that scored. It came on as a substitute, and De Bruyne assist. And I noted that that Foden was benched. Alvarez started behind Haaland. And of course, John Stones had his a familiar role in defence as well. So lots of key assets starting, but Foden didn't. Yeah, I mean, what can we learn from this? Because I mean, I'm presuming that Pep's not going to look at an Arsenal game the same as he's going to look at a Burnley game.
Perhaps not. It's so difficult to guess Pep because he came out just before the weekend saying about Foden's versatility and how he can play five positions. He can play this, he can play this, and that makes you think, okay, he's going to get lots of minutes this season, maybe filling where Mahrez was. But he didn't mention his favorite position for Foden, which was on the bench. So because yeah, straight after he was benched at Wembley, De Bruyne's back with his first preseason minutes, and yeah, he did play. Um, as you say, De Bruyne got the assist, but Foden did play an important
Yeah.
role in the goal. So just like the Arsenal assets, I feel like we're not much closer with that debate. I don't know if we're much closer on the Foden debate either.
No, there's enough doubt there. Although, as we mentioned on our goals imminent video just now, we're talking about super subs and more time. So the referees are really cracking down on time wasting. So they're looking at so they're adding those extra minutes on. So what we're seeing, as we're seeing in the World Cup as well, and already in other matches, we're seeing much more time added on. So if Foden came on in, say, the 60th minute, you're not getting 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 32 minutes. You're getting, perhaps 40, 45 minutes of Foden against increasingly tired legs, whereas he's coming to the game fresh. So if I had Foden and I was dead set on getting Foden, I'd be okay with that, because I think if he's not starting, he could still rack up quite a sizable FPL points haul off the bench. But yeah, that's something for it depends on what type of manager you are, whether you go for that. Manchester United. There was a couple of matches, August the 5th and August the 6th. The August the 6th one was a bit of a B team. I can tell that because Maguire got an assist. But August that was 1-0 against Bilbao. August the 5th, Manchester United 3-1 against Lens. Now this is more like it. Rashford scored, Antony assist, Garnacho assist for Antony, Casemiro goal, and Rashford assist. So lots. If this was an FPL match, that would be a match where you wish you'd captained Rashford by the looks of it, and took a punt on Antony. What can we learn there? I mean, Rashford's going to play up front, you would imagine, for the time being until their new strikers sorted. But is that where he's been playing in pre-season?
Yeah, well, there was a spell where Jadon Sancho was being used as a sort of makeshift forward. But in this match, yeah, it was Rashford up front with sort of Garnacho and Antony on the sides. And yeah, I think, well, because Højlund is another new signing who's come in, but he's already hurt. He's just a little knock, though, in this case. So we probably won't see him for a couple of weeks or so. So Gameweek 1 at home to Wolves, yeah, probably Rashford up front, centre forward.
Okay. Fernandes. So how's the Fernandes Mount midfield working out? Fernandes still an option, still getting forward. Oh, sorry. I think you've just bear with me a second, Mark. No, your sound has just gone. Back again now. Back again now. If you can repeat that again.
What about the Fernandes?
Yeah, about Fernandes. So I was asking, is Fernandes, I presume, still an option? Is he still going forward? How's it working out with him and Mount in the midfield?
We saw a few games ago against Arsenal that Fernandes is likely on penalties. So that's first of all a good string to have on your bow. And he wasn't involved in any of the goals directly in the last few friendlies, so that might put people off him slightly. But he and Mount seem to be combining okay. There was one match, I think, against Real Madrid where they experimented with Fernandes on the right. That wasn't good, really. So when the season begins, now that Antony's back, you'd expect those two to both advance centrally, and they seem like good options. And then at the back, you've probably seen it virally, but Onana got lobbed from distance, which is a great way to start.
But that was, I mean, I've heard good things about him so far. He seems to have been marshalling the defence, having a pop
Mhm.
at Maguire, that kind of thing. Just doing all the right things apart from being embarrassingly lobbed from distance.
Yeah, it's one of those where if you want all of his strengths on the ball and the things, if you have a good ball player like Onana, then your defensive line can push up and things like that. But the one downside to that is that yeah, you might occasionally be prone to a lob.
Okay. Rightio. Let's move on to your side, Newcastle and Nottingham Forest. Newcastle. So it was all about Anderson a few games ago in pre-season, doing well there. But Almiron did pretty well, and of course Barnes has done well. So they beat Fiorentina 2-0. Almiron scored Isak assist. Isak then scored Trippier assist. These familiar names. Newcastle then beat Villarreal on August 6th. 4-0. Murphy, Barnes scored a couple. Joelinton scored. Wilson assisted him. Wilson assisted Barnes as well. Murphy scored. I mean, there's a whole range. They're getting a lot. It seems like Newcastle are getting more goals from midfield this season than, or they perhaps will do this season than they did last season, especially with Barnes coming in. Is this looking hopeful for those looking to perhaps get Barnes a bit later?
Yeah, it's just a question of which one. There's arguably too many that are producing because if Elliot Anderson's preseason form, it almost forces him into the lineup on the opening day, but that probably reduces Barnes's chance of starting as well. So there's a lot of midfielders are delivering, and good luck to Eddie Howe on settling on just a few against Villa. But it's a nice problem to have, I suppose.
I mean, it's a
Um,
chance. I mean, you would imagine Barnes will play. The fans would want that, and I mean, on this reckoning, he's still got it. So would it be more of a case of Anderson coming on for him, or could he seriously be replaced by Anderson?
it's definitely an option, and he's sort of. I think things were expected of Anderson last season, but he didn't really get a chance. He didn't
Okay,
get as many minutes as people would have liked, really, because things were going so well for Newcastle that
okay,
Howe didn't really want to change what was
right,
working.
okay.
So maybe this is his response, just by having an incredible preseason, making it impossible to drop him. Um, there's also Anthony Gordon as well, who I think big things were expected of him this season because he was disappointing after arriving in January, but he's admitted himself that um he just sort of wasn't ready like to be thrown into it the way Howe does things. But he's had time to think about it. He's had time off to play with the tournament for the England under 21s, and he's looked really quite promising, even though
Where
he
does he
hasn't.
usually play, on the right or the left, or can he play both?
He's also been playing on the left really,
Okay,
but I think if Newcastle aren't going to buy a right winger this summer, which we thought was going to be one of the priorities, then maybe there's a chance that Gordon, the versatile Gordon, could maybe play from the right sometimes. If we have a crisis up front, he could maybe fill in as a forward.
okay,
He could be all sorts of things.
okay. Rightio. And Wilson, Isak. I mean, still no clearer there. They're both vying for that number 9 spot, I presume. Isak, we won't be seeing on the left. I mean, all the players you just mentioned. I can't believe it. Isak will even get a look in on the left. You've got everyone else wanting to play there. So, Isak or Wilson, who's going to start?
Yeah, I'd probably say Isaac
Oh,
um, gets probably has the edge over Wilson,
okay.
but it's it's still probably quite a close decision as the weeks go on, and once Europe kicks in, uh, and what makes it slightly easier is the Newcastle's fixtures are so tough that you can afford to just sit back and wait
Okay.
and see what happens. The transfer window closes. You get to see what Howe's team setup is like and make a judgment from there.
Okay. Looking at Nottingham Forest, this is good if you're backing Arsenal, who they play first fixture. They got defeated 5-0 against Rennes. And against Frankfurt, they failed to score. It was 0-0 there on August the 5th. So their last two matches there. I, I was talking about them a bit with Tom just now on the video. He was he described them as sort of a mess at the moment. They're not sure who's coming in. The team's not really gelling. So yeah, I mean, is this the picture we're getting? It's just a bit of a chaotic pre-season for them in terms of solid preparation.
Yeah, they seem like from the outside one of several teams who are really trying their hardest to be in a mess. The positive
Trying their
about
hardest to
that,
be in a mess, they're succeeding.
they're trying so hard
Yeah.
to. I'm sure we'll come on to the other two very shortly. But the good news about the 0-0 with Frankfurt is that it ended a run of 3 defeats. But the
Oh,
bad
okay.
news is they're goalless in 4 friendlies
Mm.
now. It just doesn't look good for them. It could be interesting if they do sign the 4 million goalkeeper Matt Turner.
Mm-hmm.
We might actually have a proper 4 million starting goalkeeper.
Okay.
But then there's always a chance that they buy Dean Henderson as well, which some reports
Mm.
say that they're determined to do still. So
Yeah.
we can't even, unless it happens very, very
Mm.
quickly, we can't even put
No.
Turner in.
Now, I mean, I heard Henderson being interviewed on the radio um, towards the end of last season, and he was very, even though he was on loan, he seemed very much a Forest player, and I know that other people around the Forest camp had noted, he was often there and he was there supporting the team even when he was injured, not playing. Even though he was on loan there, he was felt like a Forest player. So I guess that's rubbing off, and that's why they want him back. Really, they feel like he is definitely their player. But yeah, interesting, especially interesting the number of goalless games, was rather number of times they failed to score, I should say. So that does bode well for an Arsenal clean sheet in that fixture. Last couple of rounds to go. We've got Spurs and Sheffield United, and then West Ham, Wolves we'll look at. So Spurs, interesting, because at the time of recording, I don't know whether Harry Kane's going to stay or be Bayern Munich, but he scored 4 goals, including a penalty, as they beat Shakhtar Donetsk at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on August the 6th. And it's the 8th of August now. We're recording this. This is actually going to go out on the 9th. So tonight they play Barcelona. So we can only. So you'll have more information. The viewers will have slightly more information than we have at this stage because we're recording this just before the Barcelona match. But just going back to that Donetsk game. Yeah, Madison assisted. Kulusevski assisted. Madison assisted twice. Kulusevski assisted twice. 4 goals for Kane. I mean, they're an attacking unit again now, but it's just tough to get Kane into your side. But does elevate the likes of Madison and Kulusevski, but no Richarlison yet.
Does yeah, the Kane status seems to affect everything. So the reports today are sort of saying that he's leaning towards staying at Spurs, which
Okay.
seems unlikely, like this time last week. And that would, of course, sort of destroy Richarlison as an option. But
Yeah.
yeah, like Madison, 7.5 million, say a couple of assists there. He's taken over the set pieces a bit.
Ooh, okay.
So that can only be good. Um, you got Saar in midfield. He's 4.5 million, and he seems to be quite liked by Postecoglou. So there's definitely some attacking Spurs options, and of course there's also Sun Heung-min. If he can, he's had a huge price drop, and if he can get back to how we know he is,
Did
he
did
could
he
be.
play against? Did he play against the Nets in this game?
He did, yeah.
But no returns.
Again, again, no returns. It's a real shame. He has spoken over the summer about how he was playing in pain for
Okay.
quite a lot of last season, and that it seems to be better now. And he had this determination to show the world what the real Sun is about. But until it actually results in goals and assists, that doesn't mean anything to us, does it?
Okay, Sheffield United next. This is good if you're a Crystal Palace fan. You've got Eze in your FPL team. Sheffield United got beaten 3-0 by Stuttgart. Sheffield United. I mean, is this common for pre-season? I mean, are they basically a Championship side that's somehow in the Premier League?
Yeah, they're another team who the sales they've basically sold 2 of their star players over the past week. Burge does go to Burnley, and not really making much of an attempt to add to the squad. So don't really know what's going on there. But they lost 3-0 at home to Stuttgart there. It's just been a pretty. It feels like a pretty grim summer for them.
Yeah, I know there's a lot's up in the air, a lot of issues with their ownership. So yeah, I guess that's hampering their signing ability. But yeah, for a moment, I mean, I know Baldock's in a few teams. He may or may not start, but I think that's the best you can do really with Sheffield United at the moment. And Dyer's gone, and their pre-season looks pretty poor from a FPL point of view. Let's move on to final two: West Ham and Wolves. Now I did have Bowen in my side, but I've sort of in my FPL pre-season draft, but sort of moved him on because there's just sort of better players with better fixtures. But he had done well. But the last match was bad for West Ham, August the 5th against Bayer Leverkusen. Got beaten 4-0. Sort of, I mean, were they unlucky there? I mean, any players stood out? Was Bowen any good? Who's playing in attack? I mean, what can we learn from this fixture?
It didn't sound too good. I think when the team sheets came out, one of the more interesting things was that the 4.5 million striker Mubama was given the start, and because the rest of the lineup was strong, like it had Bowen and Paquetá and Zuma and all that lot, you're thinking, okay, that maybe he does start the season as Moyes' preferred striker, but they did lose 4-0 to Leverkusen. Sounds like it could have been more. And well, the last two clubs we're going to cover here, but it sounds like both managers are in a precarious situation. And if there is unrest at West Ham, and if Moyes does depart, then that kind of undoes anything we might have tried to guess about Mubama, because the next person will have their own ideas.
I think there are rumours that they're in for bringing off for Scott McTominay from Manchester United and Maguire, but I'm not quite sure whether that's going to really elevate them that much. But nevertheless, I hope their assets emerge because Bowen's a particularly good player to own in FPL. But I'm not sure we can get anything from the last few games of West Ham. So I think the sort of excitement I had for Bowen against Fleetwood, whoever else they played. I think it was last time we spoke about pre-season, has probably been tempered a bit by the fact that against sort of proper teams, they've been quite badly hammered. For Wolves, final team, Wolves, once again, you mentioned their manager doesn't seem happy. They're not really getting the recruits in. They drew 0-0 with Luton Town August the 2nd, August the 5th. They did win against Stade Rennes at 3-1 at Molineux, but Alt-Nouri and Sariba assist, Gomez, Nunes assist, Hoang, and then Nunes assisted again. Wolves aren't really on anyone's radar at the moment. So, but I mean, was there anything we can glean from this?
FPL wise, probably not a lot. As you said, their ownership of all of their players is very, very low. Okay. We just don't know what's going to happen there. For example, maybe
you heard that car horn go. Sort of
maybe
angry Wolves fan, probably.
Part of that might be people got burned from Pedro Neto last year, so maybe Wolves have been tarred with that brush. But at the same time, even though that was an impressive win over Rennes, sort of Lopetegui's future seems to be in doubt. They're saying that they've spoken to Gary O'Neill about taking over, and sort of they go to Manchester United on the first day of the season. That doesn't look great. The mood seems to be down generally. Players aren't really coming in. Yeah, they seem to be a team to probably avoid.
Okay, right, yeah. Well, that sort of wraps up on a really dour note there about Wolves. But there's a lot of interesting things to glean, I think, particularly for the Brighton penalty situation. Arsenal, it's a bit unclear, but it's clear that they're, whichever attacker you go for, they might get some significant minutes on the pitch and do some damage against Nottingham Forest, who, as pre-season has shown, is not a good side. Liverpool still up in the air. Salah getting lots of points. He's going to turn some heads this week. His ownership's going to go up. But perhaps Jota might be turning my head there as a cheaper option into that attack. Certainly lots of choice there. Mark, thanks so much for joining me. I think we learned a little bit more from these final matches, really, about how we're going to set up our Game Week 1 squad. So good luck with your setting up your Game Week 1 squad, and good luck all those listening and watching. For now, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.